This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post, brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 25th of September 2019, and I am 2J.
I am 2M.
And I am DM. Let's take a look at today's headlines.
Do you guys know that today, 56 years ago, Kenya's national anthem was declared ready?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Out of the oven.
Yes, out of the oven, if you want to say that.
And turns out it's the best national anthem in
the world.
Oh,
Exactly.
Yes. The Daily Nation. Killer school owner still walking free.
Yeah.
The Standard. Cohen Kin failed to lock WAIRIMU out. And the Star, I know the killers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So perhaps we can take the Star and the Standard together?
Yes.
Yeah.
And first with the Standard, first let's give context.
Yeah, the context yesterday was that Todd Cohen's funeral actually took place yesterday.
Yes.
And WAIRIMU was allowed to attend.
Absolutely. By the court.
By the court, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And so the Standard saying Cohen Kin failed to lock WAIRIMU out. Are people invited to funerals?
Yes.
Oh wow, I didn't know. Anyway.
Well, we know that the context here
Yes.
is that they were antagonizing each other.
Yeah.
And because they each suspect each other of killing Cohen, they didn't want each other
Yes, to be present at
to
the
be
funeral.
present at the
I mean,
funeral.
we didn't actually mention this at the beginning of the week, but Gabriella, his sister, very suspiciously left the country before the funeral.
And under the reason that women are not allowed at Jewish funerals.
Oh, is that what she said?
Really?
Apparently, that's what her lawyer said.
Well, that obviously doesn't make sense because this was a wedding up to Jewish standards, and WAIRIMU was present.
Absolutely.
But what I think also the newspapers are referring to is the video that came out from the funeral.
Yes.
Where WAIRIMU was attacking the people who were present at the funeral.
Yeah.
So family members who she says have not been there for her,
Yes.
people who she claims may have taken part in his killing,
Absolutely.
and I think that alludes to the Star's headline, I know the killers.
She said the killers are
here.
Yeah.
And they're wolves in sheepskin.
In sheepskin.
I liked that speech. She's very brave.
Yes.
Let me tell you, I think that now maybe the country is beginning to agree with me that there's something to this story.
Yes.
But what I've also learned is when they were burying this man, the lawyer kept turning towards her. And I think what Murgo has done very well is he has humanized WAIRIMU. Now, the country last week was taking shots at her.
Yeah.
If you
She was
see the comments,
demonized.
she was demonized. But now she's been humanized, and everybody is saying, maybe there is a second
After
opinion.
seeing that leaked video, I really do feel for her. And that's why I take issue with the angle that the Standard took.
Yes.
Cohen
As if she shouldn't have
failed to lock WAIRIMU out. How can you lock a woman who has just lost her husband out of the funeral?
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to the headlines,
Yes.
we have a three-part criteria that we use to analyze them for you. We ask, is it topical or is it speculative? Is it repetitive
Yes.
or groundbreaking? And finally, is the headline thoughtful or is it just lazy?
The Standard one is lazy, it's rude, and it offends me.
Without further ado, this one I think was quite succinct and interesting.
Absolutely.
And would draw me to buy the paper.
Most definitely.
I know the killers. So decisive.
Yes.
So let's put it in the parking bay.
Yes.
And then we have the Daily Nation.
Yes.
Killer school owner still walking free. So this is a continuation of the story from yesterday in Dagoretti,
where
a classroom collapsed, killing how many children?
I think it was
about
eight children.
Eight children.
A very
and injuring
tragic,
several more.
And injuring several more. So it was a very tragic story. And the Daily Nation, the context in this story is that the owner of the school was not arrested.
Absolutely.
As the primary suspect. And I think as it should be, he's the primary suspect. He should be arrested. He should be the one leading the authorities. To the authorities that allowed him or that
gave him permission,
or gave him permission.
Because we asked this question yesterday, who is to blame? And I think we identified, the owner of the school, but also the authorities who gave him those permits.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So on the side of the permits, Sonko did announce, I think it was early today, that he was going to find the person who was responsible for signing those permits and those licenses and have them fired. And I think you were telling me that that person may already have been fired. So now I think the next step is, why is this guy still walking free?
He actually shouldn't be at large. The buck stops with him in this case.
Actually, let me put it this way. Maybe because there was no complainant, because the police do not act in a vacuum, they cannot just go and arrest someone if there is no complainant. But maybe there will be in a short while. However, it also takes two to tango. This man did not wake up and decide I want to build a school without any government approval.
That's true.
If he's going to be arrested, any person who validated and approved this building to stand must go inside as well.
Yeah, very true.
But then at least we should have been seeing a headline today that says the owner of the school was taken in for a 10-hour questioning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where's
absolutely.
Where's Kinoti right now?
Is it maybe?
He only likes to fry big fish.
What do we think of this headline in particular? I think it pales in comparison to the Standard.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It really does.
It raises an interesting question, one that we asked yesterday, but I think as the story evolves, it's not quite so good.
Yeah, where did Gabriel go?
I don't know, she went back to the Netherlands. How have you jumped back to another story?
I just want to know where Kinoti is.
Oh,
wow.
That's a good one.
So we have a winning headline from the start. And now to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. And just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to analyze them. For you, we ask, is the cartoon humorous or dry?
Yeah.
Is it satirical or pessimistic? And finally, is it effective or is it lazy?
So all the cartoons today refer to the collapsed school building.
Yes.
And I allowed them for that. It's an important
definitely
thing to discuss and put in the fore.
Absolutely.
What do we have in the start?
We have a drawing of bundles of old money that are about to expire in 5 days.
You should have used the new currency.
You should have used the new currency, ozone.
Yes, and the caption there, and the money, the bundle of notes have formed a wall of the buildings. And the caption there is the only approved building blocks required.
Yeah.
All right, and that's money. That's all you need to get your way around government.
Exactly. No matter how shady or badly built your building is, as long as you give them a stack of money, you're good to go.
Absolutely. And maybe we should reiterate, maybe it is time we support the war against graft. Maybe it should be trickled down. Let's not just fight it up there with the cabinet.
You're really changing your tune. Now you're very into this.
When children are killed, then you have to change tune.
Everything changes.
That's very true.
Something else.
Parking Bay for the moment.
Yes.
Ndula, is it Ndula?
Yes.
Yes, Ndula. Caricature of Nairobi Women Rep Esther Passaris, Dagoretti MP John Kiarie, and the governor himself, Kiarie, and what's his name?
Sonko.
And the other selfie stick, and they're half
rubble. Yes, and they're half people, half crocodile.
Half people, half crocodiles.
And they're crying.
Yes,
and they're crying.
And the caption is disaster celebrities.
They're crying crocodile tears.
Yeah, I think this is in reference to a little bit of a insider that was done by Citizen last night, where they looked at these 3 disaster celebrities who also happen to be MPs, who happen to always turn up at the end of a crisis, taking pictures, asking questions, but seeming to capitalize on the disaster for their own benefit.
Absolutely.
So they're getting political mileage from disaster.
Yes.
Exactly.
However, they're not doing anything to mitigate or to forestall these disasters in their various jurisdictions.
But guys, I want to disagree. You see this is misplaced anger. If I was a member of parliament and the building collapsed within my constituency, I will be there. Because, and maybe it is sad, but I have to say it, you must not waste a disaster. You have to take every advantage of it, especially if you're a politician. You see, where the anger should actually be going to is the person who approved these buildings. You see, if this building was standing and it was in good condition, it had all the approvals, then these MPs will not show up where disasters are. They'll probably be in parliament doing their work. But because they're also politicians, just let them be.
Yeah, that's fair enough. They should be there when there's rubble, but they should also be there when the buildings are standing. Why?
Exactly.
Because this is not the first time this has happened. Not just in this country, but in Nairobi.
Absolutely.
So what are they doing? If they're always there when there's rubble, what are they doing themselves to make sure that there are no rubble incidents?
Exactly.
That's
and so for that, I do
question.
Appreciate Ndula and Citizen for calling them out for their capitalization of disasters.
That's a very good question, because what if a building can collapse in Dagoretti, a school building, how many other condemned buildings are there?
Most definitely, All right, let's look lastly at the standard. And again, we have Kaso.
We have Kaso.
Oh, this cartoon.
Oh, it's actually not. This is part of. This is an editorial.
It's an editorial.
It made me sad.
Yes, it's a drawing of a small pupil, and next to her is cards. But what the cards are supporting is an anvil, and the anvil is
corruption and impunity. So she's in a class of cards. Play on a house of cards.
And it's about to,
It's quite heavy. I think it's an effective cartoon. I think that's the criteria that it meets. So comparative to the other cartoons, what do we think?
I think this one is a bit too sad for me, especially because what the advil represents is the same way that the ceiling collapsed on those kids. For me, that's just too much.
So maybe that's why it should win.
No.
Because of its heaviness. Yeah.
Maybe.
Really?
Yeah.
I would disagree, and I would say let's take another look at the star, because I think this is a
At
far better.
ozone.
Yeah, ozone. I'm surprised I keep saying this.
So I think, okay, so this one is very thought-provoking, and it's effective in that way.
Yeah.
That other one is also thought-provoking because it plays on our heartstrings.
Absolutely.
It's the truth, it's an uncomfortable feeling, but it's a feeling that we should feel.
And you see this is red over here, it's blood. That one has not been killed yet, but it's about to happen if government does not take.
And it's even more scary.
However, just as you said that we are pointing our anger in the wrong direction, I think this is asking us to point our anger in the right direction.
At ourselves also.
The people who are giving the money and the people who are receiving the money. And I think, based on what you said, I think this
you have saved ozone. He has the winning card.
What is happening, right?
But what I like is she has said based on what I said. That's what it's going to be.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What is our final thought?
And now, our final thought, inspired by a book called M. And M in this case stands for Mussolini, Benito Mussolini, former Italian Prime Minister. And the caption there is, in Italian, is Il figlio del secolo, which means, in English, the son of the century. Summary.
Yes. So M, Il figlio del secolo, by Antonio Scurati.
Yes.
So figlio actually means son or child. So it is the son or the child of the century. So Benito Mussolini ruled as Prime Minister of Italy for almost 2 decades.
Yes.
So in 1922, he becomes Prime Minister and the leader of the fascist party. And at first, he ruled Italy democratically and constitutionally.
Yes.
But in 1925, he turned Italy into a one-party state and ruled as Italy's dictator. He called himself Il Duce.
Il Duce. The leader.
The leader. So his rise to power is a very remarkable story. He went from being a journalist to a minor political figure to becoming prime minister within the space of only 5 years. Wow. I think that's quite interesting. You don't have that very often.
No.
So Mussolini was born in 1883 in northern Italy. And due to poor employment opportunities, he moved to Switzerland in 1902. This is where he came across his first brush with socialism.
And so apparently he was avoiding conscription into the army. Ironically,
yes. So he comes back to Italy, a committed socialist. And he becomes a well-known journalist who advocates for Italy's entrance into World War I, which is where that irony comes in.
Absolutely.
However, the country decides to take a neutral stance in the war, and so Mussolini, becoming very aggravated by this, he becomes expelled. He's expelled from the Socialist Party. But he eventually joins the war in 1915, but returns back to the country in 1917 because of an injury. And just like Hitler, who was in Germany at the time, he becomes very deeply influenced by the war and the effects of the war, believing that war is essential for a nation to achieve its greatness. And later we're going to see how this would continue, this personality trait would continue as he begins to seize every opportunity to become involved in war and conflict. So in 1919, he forms a fascist party, and it is supported by former war veterans who felt ignored by the country. They felt like they had gone into the war in vain. And they become what is then called the Black Shirts, who terrorized all the political opponents of the fascist party. In 1922, Italy begins to slip into political chaos, and the Black Shirts march on the streets of Rome, and they present Mussolini as the only viable person who can restore order to Italy. And so the king at the time, which is very strange, there was a king. The king at the time, Victor Emmanuel, invites Mussolini into the government and makes him prime minister. And Mussolini begins to remodel Italy in the image of himself. He says that Italy will reflect me and I shall reflect Italy. So in 1935, Mussolini invades Abyssinia, what we now know as Ethiopia, that many see as one of the first precursors for World War II. So eventually, Mussolini and Hitler become the best of friends, and Germany and Italy form a war alliance as Germany declares war on France. However, World War II eventually exposes how ill-equipped Italy was for the war. They were not prepared in terms of men, in weapons, in any kind of like war preparation. And so eventually the public begin to become disinterested with the war and the losses that the government has made. And so the government turn against him and they have a vote of no confidence against Mussolini. And he is ousted as prime minister. And so the king complies with the vote and Mussolini is then arrested and placed in prison. And so then in 1943, Hitler's army then come into Italy and they save Mussolini from prison.
It's like a movie.
It is.
Paratroopers actually swooped in
and took him away. Unlocked the door and they released him. And so they rescue him from prison, and eventually they declare him king of the north of Italy. But this doesn't last for long, because now even Mussolini is tired, and he actually says, "I just want to leave." So he tries to escape to Switzerland, and on the way escaping to Switzerland, the issues of propaganda actually end up biting him in the behind, because he had put posters of his face all over the country while he was prime minister. So that by the time he's trying to cross into Switzerland, the Italian forces are looking and they're like, "Kill him!" And so eventually they take him, and unfortunately they kill him. And that is the end of the 2 decades of Mussolini being prime minister of Italy.
What a story.
It's a fantastic story. And guys, I have seen a common thread over here. And it's amongst these dictators. Look at Mao. He had mango fever, and he gave his people loved mangoes, so he gave them mangoes. They stopped the war. Pinochet, he liked the Chicago boys. He turned the country around. This man called Mussolini had an organ and an agency, and they called it OND. In other words, Opera Nazionale. Let me start again. It's in Italian. It's not my mother tongue. Opera Nazionale dopo lavoro.
Okay. In English,
what does that
means the National Recreational Club. Right. Now, this club was a leisure club. It was a recreational program, and it was designed to channel funds to recreational facilities, so building cinemas, building sports infrastructure.
You actually said it was modeled around what we know as the YMCA.
YMCA. And it was actually maybe at sometimes it was been also compared to youth groups, right? A conglomeration,
like Nashi in Russia.
You know, and it was also designed because you said people were despondent because of the war that had happened, and also economically, the Italian economy wasn't doing that well.
So it was an opium, like a sedation for the masses.
Yes, and what also Mussolini did, I think he banned trade unions. So as a counter to that, he introduced this OND thing. Now, under this program, where they funded school activities, all right, stadiums were built, and they were able to fund school trips. They were able to give subsidized fare rates on trains. Now people were happy, all right? It was a way of releasing and relieving stress of the people. Right? Now every weekend they used to keep people in stadiums to watch, and after that they would go to social halls where they would drink and they would do plays and they would watch all this. But what was also interesting was this, that the fascist government, it gave people pocket radios where they would be able to listen to fascist propaganda, laced with entertainment schedules. They also put cinemas, right, in places where people would be able to see fascist, where there were no cinemas in the rural areas. They were able to put projectors so that people could be able to go and see movies.
How
there.
clever!
I
think he understood. He understood the power of media because he was a journalist.
He was a journalist.
Exactly.
That's the point. Now, by the time OND was coming to being, it had 300,000 members. By 1939, all right, all the way from 1925, the numbers of people, the membership increased to 8 million people.
Wow.
All right, and about 80% of people who work for the state and private sector were members of OND.
Wow.
Yeah, and maybe the fascist propaganda did not work. However, what worked was the despondency and anger in people dissipated. Dissipated, and people started believing in Mussolini, even if he did nothing for them.
I mean, that's a very clever dictator.
Absolutely.
Having said that,
yes.
let us weigh him against the framework that we have been using this week. So we've been looking at dictators, and so far he's the third one, and we've been looking at them against 3 criteria. One, ideology and conviction. Ambition and intention for country, and finally legacy. I think on the first one, which is ideology and conviction, he wins.
He created his own ideology.
So he meets the criteria and he also exceeds it. In fact, if we put the 3 that we've talked about so far on a spectrum, I think Mao Zedong would be in the middle. Because he ruled using ideology. This is a guy who declared that he read Das Kapital 100 times, and we could see that through the course of his leadership. But on the bad end of the spectrum with no ideologies, Pinochet, we don't know if he read anything.
He was just pulled along.
He was pulled along. And then today, Benito Mussolini is on the far end of the spectrum. The guy crafted his own ideology, which he stayed true to
fascism
in the end. But then also remarkably, he influenced another famous dictator, Hitler. So the second criteria is ambition and intention for country.
Yes.
I think in this one he fails. Primarily because his ambition for country was very, I think, narcissistic. It was personal. He saw himself as the modern day Julius Caesar. And what part of his intention was to revive the Roman Empire.
Exactly.
So besides the title Il Duce, the leader, he was also called the founder of the empire.
Yes.
And so, part of having the empire was invading Abyssinia, Libya.
Yes. He was very ambitious. He wanted the Mediterranean Sea, the whole Mediterranean Sea, to be an Italian lake.
I love that.
So yes, indeed, as you told us, in 1935 he invaded Somalia because at this point the Italian empire only consisted of Libya. Somalia and Eritrea. So he saw Ethiopia as an easy target. It was sandwiched between the two. But he underestimated them. We learned in high school about the Battle of Adwa. In Menelik, the second led the Ethiopians into victory, and they were the only ones who were not the only African country that wasn't colonized besides Liberia. But anyway, in this instance, in 1935, they did conquer Ethiopia, but with a lot of cost because it drove them into debt and a lot of disenfranchisement. So on that part, in this criteria, he fails because it was not a nationalistic one.
That's what I love.
Finally, on legacy.
He was beaten by Africans.
He also fails this criteria.
Legacy.
Of legacy.
Yes.
For two reasons. The first thing is that long-term prosperity was traded for short-term gains during his tenure. So he had government programs that were very operational. They weren't as visionary as Big Four or Vision 2030. And we saw that Mao Zedong, on his part, he was looking at the future of China in like 100-year increments. And so Mussolini was quite short-sighted to that extent. And then secondly, he mortgaged his vision to Hitler.
Imagine.
Absolutely.
Because although in the 1930s, actually in the late 20s, he was an inspiration to Hitler. Hitler admired him. In fact, it was said that he once wrote him a letter asking for his autograph. I don't know to what extent that is true. But in the 1930s, by the late 1930s, the table had turned, and it was Mussolini who was pandering and admiring Hitler, because at that time Hitler was very, very powerful.
Can I ask a devil's advocate question in regards to legacy? Because this book M that we're looking at today, one of the critiques, or rather the reviews that came in about it, was how it is now inspiring a new generation of neo-fascists in Italy.
I saw that.
But this is the thing, though. The book also says, or the author says, that there's a whole generation of Italians to whom Mussolini, if you tell them Mussolini, you might as well be mentioning the Middle Ages. He's so far away from them. He's so far away from them. And because he currently has a mixed legacy, because there's people who are ambivalent, there's people who only see him in comparison to Hitler. There are Italians who say, well, he wasn't that bad, at least we weren't the architects of the Holocaust. And then there are those who are very opposed to him because they're aware of the atrocities that he committed, even outside of the country, because in Ethiopia, a lot of civilian men, women, and children were murdered, died for his cause. And then there are those who allowed him. They say he was actually a good leader. And with all dictators, there's always a section of people who will like them, because dictatorships always bring stability.
That's very true.
Oppression is suppressed.
So my question, what I'm asking is, how long is legacy? Because this is almost 80 years later, and his legacy is now being revived, because those sentiments that he was tapping into then are coming up again. So can legacy come up 100 years later?
It could, and it could actually change completely. And in fact, I think Robert Mugabe's legacy in the next 100 years will be so different. We won't be saying that there's a mixed legacy. There'll be a generation that was saying this was actually thought leadership in terms of Pan-Africanism, and why didn't the rest of Africa support him?
You know, there's something called the Putin generation. And the Putin generation are these very young people in Russia who have just known, they actually think Putin is the first president of Russia. If you ask them. Then there's a and these guys are very hippie. They like going on what they call skateboards and roller skating and going to discos and everything. But Putin is their idol. Next where I'm going is Iran. I was actually watching a documentary the other day. They have put the skateboards stuff in everybody in Tehran, the capital city of Iran. Right now, the masses there, they love the Ayatollah, and although they have no political, they know nothing about this guy called the Shah of Iran or the Ayatollah Khamenei who died. Point here is this: the methods of Mussolini did work. 1922 to 1939, 17 years. This man said in the power of stability and having a happy society, it means something he did was right. I don't know whether they prospered economically, I do not know that, but he understood the opium of the masses, and the opium of the masses is not money, it is happiness.
So the new opium is skateboarding?
Yeah, that's
yeah, but happiness is very relative. The ones who died, I don't think were very happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today we have a double win by the Star, who gave us the winning cartoon and the winning headline.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we are also on your TV screens on GoTV, Star Times, and on Pang,
yes,
free to air.
Yes.
Have a good evening and see you tomorrow.